You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر أوب 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 أوب
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Welcome to Soccer Today. I'm Duane Rollins. Voice once again, not quite all there, but we're here to give you all that we got. Kevin Laramee joins me as always in Montreal. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing pretty good, Duane. We've been following a lot of things recently. The training camp, Montreal Impact are back in Montreal for a week, and they're going to get ready for the Tampa Bay Invitational in a few weeks. So it's almost life back to normal, where the really short off season, it's taking its toll now, and we're back in the thick of things. In a month, the season has started.
Yeah, well, less so for the Vancouver Whitecaps, who I believe, just off the top of my head, is something like 15 days until they play in the CCL. So that's insanity right there, Kevin. Speaking of the Whitecaps, it's raining here in Toronto today. Is it raining in Montreal?
Well, it's snowing because it's colder. Thanks for that. But no, it's not raining here in Montreal.
Okay, but it rained last night at their kit unveiling. Ha ha ha.
You know what? I like it. I think it looks nice. It's of our day. It's of our time, and I like it. I like you were saying. No, I'm not gonna make fun of that jersey. It looks good. It's different. It's something different than the other team. And for once, we're not gonna have a cookie cutter jersey. And Vancouver, well, I'm gonna say for once, they had not cookie cutter jersey. They had like at least original design jersey for a few times now. And this one, yes, it's a very millennial looking type of jersey. If you're not of the hipster millennial or just of today's time, you might not be liking that designs on your normal shirt that you would wear. But I have some shirts that's similar to this, and I got to say, I like it.
Okay, well, if they want to wear polka dots, they can wear polka dots. But
what's wrong with polka dots? Well, what do you have against polka dots?
I have nothing against polka dots. Anyone who wants to wear polka dots can wear polka dots. If they want to wear polka dots on the jersey, then that's fine. What I don't get, what I don't get about the jerseys and the jerseys unveilings is why it takes like 7,000 words to explain that basically they put blue triangles on a white jersey. That doesn't really require as much text and explanation as they do. But I guess we like to have lots of dramatic things nowadays, Kevin.
Yeah, well, it's more than just dramatic things. We like to feel that we do everything with a sense of purpose, and not just a sense of purpose, that we do everything is thought out, is do it done for a reason. That's why, right? So let me guess. I haven't read the 6,000 words, but let me guess. The triangles represent rain. It represents as well the long view from Vancouver downtown to the mountaintops of the Rockies that are looking like triangles not too far away. And it represents the two rivers as well and the deltas in the vicinity of Vancouver.
Oh, something like that, you know. The white's always the snow. The Whitecaps name itself is symbolism, so we all just kind of go with it, Kevin. There's more important stuff was going on yesterday in Vancouver, though. Obviously, Don Garber was there, and he made some interesting comments to journalists. The ones that a lot of people, there's two of them that they're getting a lot of attention. The one that's going to get the most attention universally is the fact that he outright admitted that the MLS in the past favored certain teams over others. Now, this is something that we.
Sorry, Duane, I was just going to say, so are we talking about the LA Galaxy here that we've been talking about maybe since Beckham, that they had some rules in favor for their development?
I'm guessing that's exactly who he was talking about, but it's He didn't outright admit that what teams he was referring to. I mean, I'm sure that some people in Vancouver would like to suggest that TFC got some favoritism back when they were so crappy that they needed help, and who knows, maybe they did. I just think it's kind of interesting that he would admit it finally, because for years they would deny that obvious fact. You looked at LA when they created full rules. Like, I mean, they said, we're going to sign David Beckham and we don't care what the salary cap is. We're going to sign him. The league went, okay, let's hold on for a day or two. We'll figure something out here. And then they later on wanted to sign.
Let us find a way so you can sign him. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then later on, when they wanted another DP, they did the same thing. And then basically, other teams sort of took advantage of the favoritism that went to LA, but they were second in. So, you look at the TFC and they had the money to follow LA's lead, but the Columbus Crews of the world didn't. Now, I don't necessarily have an issue when it comes to that stuff with the DPs and the increasing of them, because I was in favor of them and being increased. But it's hard that you understand where the critics of MLS come from sometimes, right? And we've been cynical about the Galaxy stuff for years, but it like I say, you understand if you're not a fan of a Major League Soccer team and you're on that side of the equation when you're having these conversations. It's hard to take conversations like that and not go like, WTF, man. Like, how are you a real league if you're admitting this? But he claims now that there's no favoritism going on. So I guess that begs the question, do we believe him?
I do. For one reason, Duane, look at the offseason, or maybe the last two offseason in the entire MLS. Which team got better? Which team signed who? A kind of game now in MLS where it's across the board. It's not just one. It's not just here. It's not just that. Just New York. Not just LA. It's pretty much across the board now that you have either DPs, widespread household name in the world of soccer, of course, that appeared in some of the teams, stadiums, like imprint, what I call imprint on your own market, how you're covered by media in your own city, how you are talked about, perceived by your fans. I think it's getting to a level now that it might not be equal for all 22 teams now, but it's getting damn close to it. And at least 15 of those 22, in my opinion, are on the same level playing field.
Yeah, you hope that's the case moving forward. I do actually think that probably, that they are universally applying the rules now. But I guess then the question to follow up from that is, was it necessary for them to do the things that they did? And this is where I suffer with this. I don't think that they needed to be so hidden about what they were doing for years. I think that they just needed to come out before LA was already making noise about this and say, look, we're gonna evolve in this. Like, they should have had the foresight to figure out what the DP rule, for instance, would have made sense, and put that in play before LA was actively searching out there trying to get players, because it looks like collusion by the league to make the big markets do well and not going to grow the sport at all. But I guess you move on and you go from there. But speaking of lying, the other thing that Garber said yesterday, which has got the backup of a lot of Canadians here and Americans still believing delusionally that he's telling the truth, is that he was asked about the NASL. So we didn't talk about this when it happened for some reason, but he was asked about the NASL's decision to make Canadians domestic league-wide. And he said, well, I can't comment on the NASL, but it's illegal under U.S. law. There are plenty of legal opinion out there that differs with that. And the fact that Garber continues to say it so black and white is so offensive to Canadian MLS fans, Kevin. I'll just say it that way. Like, quit lying to us. The reason MLS... So go ahead.
No, Duane, the caveat of this is the legal aspect of that ruling is you're right and you're wrong. Look at the two leagues, though. Same laws do not apply the same way. Why? The single entity and antitrust laws in the United States for top flight example companies. And that would be very different for MLS than it would be for NASL. The scale of those as well higher, it makes a difference. So I do understand where you're coming from. If it's okay for one league to consider them, because basically what counting Canadian as domestic means in labor term is giving a Canadian the same rights and responsibilities as a worker as the United States as an American worker. So basically, it's like handing out a green card to a worker, and you can't just hang out green cards like you're handing out boxes of cereals. So there's that aspect to it, and the fact that MLS is a single entity. Built different way. The infrastructures of the business of MLS is built very differently than it is in the NASL, and the scale of it has something to do with it as well. So yes, it's very relatable, both of those situations. But in terms of labor laws, I could see a difference between the two. I'm not saying Don Garber is necessarily 100% right when he says it's because of labor laws, but there is some difference in the way those companies and those businesses are built.
Sure. The labor law rule it's a legal interpretation that MLS is choosing to lean upon. More accurately, it's a labor interpretation that the USSF is choosing to lean on. Now, I know the USSF sanctions the other two leagues, but as you say, because they're a lower level, they just don't care as much. When it comes to Major League Soccer, they're choosing to enforce their interpretation of this rule upon the Canadian teams in it, even though the Canadian teams add a lot of value to the league. Now, where this fails, and I know American listeners out there, some resist this idea because there is a legal interpretation that can back the MLS up in this. But the reality is there are other industries out there, not just other leagues, but other industries out there that do favor Canadians over other foreign workers. Not just Canadians too. There's NAFTA favoritism that happens as well. There was some couple great articles written last year. Stephen Sandor, Elizabeth, what's Kevin? From Montreal. What's her last name?
Cotignola.
Thank you. She's a lawyer herself, and they wrote a couple great articles that really explored this a lot. And maybe I'll try and dig them up and put them out on my feed later today, where they talk to legal experts. And this idea that it's a universal black and white rule that it's just all carte blanche, that we should just give them a free pass on is ridiculous. There's a lot of opportunity that MLS could do if they chose to, and they would probably be fine. Like I said, there are other industries out there that favor Canadian workers over other foreign workers. They have not been challenged on this law. There is no reason to think that MLS would be if they put this forward, but the USSF most likely is who is behind this continued attitude to resist having them go forward. Now, maybe if you're an American fan listening to this show, you're probably not on the protectionist side of things. You probably agree with us that Canadians should be domestics, but if you're not, then I just ask you to consider the Canadian perspective for a second here. This is supposed to be our D1 league. How can? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I agree with you because it's supposed to be our D1 league in Canada. So in Canada, they're obviously considered as domestics, and that I don't know if it should be the case for the entire league. Maybe there's the close states, the states that are touching Canada could have. I don't know. But the only thing is it fair for players from other countries, for Mexican players that play in MLS, should they be considered domestic as well? Or just because they have their own league, no, they're not. So how do you justify the bias?
Because it's our D1 league.
Part of it is our D1 league. 3 teams of that.
No, the whole league is our D1. I disagree with that interpretation. Yeah, the 3 teams are, but the 3 teams in Canada count the Americans as domestics, which is the choice of those 3 teams, and they fought for that because they felt that they were at a competitive disadvantage, as TFT in the first couple of years illustrated. They probably were. So nonetheless, but the reason it's that simple. Mexico has its own league. They don't need to be counted domestic in the MLS because it's not their leagues. The CSA has every right to fight for this. I think that it's a bit silly of Major League Soccer to dig their heels in on this. I don't think it's Major League Soccer, though. As I said, it's a bit silly of the USSF to dig their heels in this because it wouldn't make that big of a difference long term. This is really just
where we make a difference. Sorry to interrupt once again. The connection is a little bit iffy, so we're having difficulties knowing each other's timing. But when you're looking at Duane, Canada's men's national team, okay, if they consider domestics at this point, it does help Canada's men's national team to develop in 5-10 years, short term, and that in a way is detrimental to U.S. soccer, especially the U.S. Soccer Federation and U.S. men's national team, because there's only so much space in the hex. There's only 3 and 3.5 and 4. So you do have a competitive advantage. Not that it's an unfair one. It's a fair one. It's a core decision, business fair advantage, yes, but is an advantage that U.S. wants to uphold, probably. To uphold.
That would be a little paranoid of them. I mean, you're talking about maybe 5 or 6 players that might take advantage of this initially.
As a principal, as a nation that develops soccer players for themselves, do they want to give the option that they will develop players that are going to represent Canada as well, to give them that boost maybe that we need to make finally the World Cup? You know what I mean? So in a way, the competitive aspect does get into that equation too.
Yeah, it's a reciprocal thing though, right? Because the 3 Canadian teams are providing a great deal of financial money into Major League Soccer, which in turn helps the U.S. system. The 3 MLS teams in Canada are giving opportunities to American players, young American players even, to allow them to develop. I mean, look, has one of the, like Vancouver is developing a young potential U.S. national team player right now that they help become an American, right? Like, this is stuff that is being benefited up here by them. So the fact that because of the financial might that's coming in, because of the fact that these teams are helping the American system out, because the Canadian Premier League, when it launches, is going to help the American system indirectly too, because there will be American players in that likely will be given the same opportunity as the Canadians in many ways, just to fill those rosters out. So I don't know. It just seems like a petty thing to dig into, and it really would be such an easy symbolism that the MLS and USSF could do to sort of just make the Canadian partners in this league feel like they're an equal. Yeah. And they haven't until this day. And it's something that I think a lot of American observers are starting to understand a little bit, how the Canadian observers up here get their backs up about this, because we're the forgotten partner. I mean, even the verbiage that they use, sometimes they talk about we when they're talking about the U.S. and stuff like that, and they're getting a little better with that. But anyway, it's all just part of the same thing, Kevin.
But it's easy for the NASL to be devil's advocate here for a second. When you're looking at the NASL, for them, that with their relaunch this year, their new teams, it's easier for the NSL to do that and fill the roster that does need a lot of filling right now. As we're talking for the teams, it does, like, it's almost like they're giving a candy. Like, okay, Canada, we haven't been nice to you. We had Edmonton and Ottawa. We lost Ottawa. We got Edmonton. We haven't been nice to you over the last few years. I remember saying that, we talked about it in 2 Sawtooths back then, how NASL missed the boat with teams in Canada, and maybe it's a way for them to be like, okay, here, we're making amends. We're giving Canadian soccer players a candy here.
All right. Final thing, Steven Sandor pointed it out that the new NASL commissioner is actually a lawyer with contract law experience. So that just underlines the point that the black and whiteness of the MLS position is likely overstated. And we'll leave it at that. This is up for interpretation, and certainly NASL has interpreted it a different way. All right, Kevin, let's take a break. We'll come back in with a little Academy talk.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back. This is a small piece of news, but I found it interesting, and I combine it with some of the decisions that are being made by teams that have 2 teams out there. Seattle has loaned a player to FC Cincinnati for the year. They have an S2. They have their own USL team. So this is making a lot of people question why they would loan a player to another USL team when they have their own USL team. And the obvious answer, I guess, is that they feel that Cincinnati would be a better development platform for this kid. So that begs the question again, why then do you have your own if you're not going to utilize it for all your players? You're still going to loan it out. I guess maybe each player is a little different, but I thought it was an interesting jumping off point to have a small academy conversation today, Kevin.
Yeah, I see it differently though, because I have followed some young prospect of the team I like to watch in England, Chelsea. And if you're looking at players like the Loftus-Cheek, the Nathan Ake, and all those very young prospect, young few years ago when I started watching them, at one point they do get loaned out, even though like the pyramid is complete and there is a U23 team and all that, they do go there, but it's not the be all end all. The actual life experience of going somewhere else on your own, especially if you're on your own city, hometown, or you're homegrown, you've been there for a few years, you've created yourself a situation where comfort is part of it and you have your own routine and stuff. And getting loaned out for a season, even though competitive level might be very close to USL and ASL, but just the fact to experience different teammates, different atmosphere, to adapt to situations that are different when you come back maybe to your main goal, your main club, because sometimes they never come back, sometimes they do. Lukaku never really came back. Ake came back a few weeks ago, just as an example. And we're starting to see this, though, in the MLS. And you mentioned the Seattle player. There's other players in the last week that the same situation happens. And it is a case-by-case situation. But some players that are still young in help as well to grow in maturity when you are loaned out on your own to a city that you don't know.
Yeah, well, the difference with the Chelsea situation, of course, is they're being loaned to a higher level, right? This is them being loaned to a secondary level. I don't necessarily disagree with it. To be clear, I think it's interesting that MLS teams are starting to see it this way. And again, from a Toronto perspective, where I'm used to, I've seen players that have actually benefited from going away. That was one of the feelings that they had with Jordan Hamilton back in the day, even though they could have played him in League One, they could have kept him around, but they wanted to get him a slightly higher level play and they wanted to give him experience. And they sent him to Portugal of all places for a while. And then eventually the next year he went down to the Hammerheads. And that was a benefit to him, I think, in the long run. And now we're starting to see Jordan Hamilton begin to develop into the player that we thought he might be. He had 2 goals in a preseason game the other day, by the way. So that's good news for TFC fans and for Canadian National Team fans. So it is just an interesting thing. Kevin, I know it's early days, kind of, but from observing the Montreal camp right now, do you see any difference in how they're treating their younger kids now that FC Montreal's not there, or do you think that Ottawa is just going to be sort of used in the way that we're talking about right now?
It's very early to tell right now because you're looking at the training camp. Some players are getting chances. Some players are. It's going to be difficult to crack the Montreal Impact lineup, but there is some space this year. That's a difference between other years. The Montreal Impact really have chosen to go with continuity in the off season, and draft pick and homegrowns are plentiful, especially homegrowns with the signing of Tabla, Chouanière, and there's going to be some trialists. So it is going to be interesting to see if they do get the chance. But I do feel that is something at least more in the forefront of their thinking than it was years in the past.
Yeah, that's it's the new way, and we've saw in the last couple of days. Minnesota launched kicked off its NYCFC sort of expanded what it was doing, took it a little more seriously. These are announcements that are coming out right now. You saw Atlanta when they launched; that was one of their first signings. Their first signings, period, were coming from academies, and the fact that they were starting a full-fledged academy and signing players from it a year before they were even a team. Said something that about the importance of this. I mean, this isn't groundbreaking stuff to say right now, but it is the key component of what the difference between this era of MLS, whether you want to call it 3.0, 4.0, 23.0, whatever you want to call it, and the previous one is that the homegrowns are going to play a major role. The Red Bulls, the McCarty trade, I think it was based largely on their belief and their confidence that they can find free, not just cheap, but free replacements to come in from their academy. They're going to provide enough value that they can spend that money elsewhere on the roster. And this is going to be the key component of this year. And when you look at teams, and there are teams out there, teams that are quite successful right now, were quite successful in the last era, that don't really have very good academy systems. Portland comes to mind as the most obvious one. They just don't prioritize the academy out there at all. And it's my opinion that teams like that are going to get left behind in this year if they don't up that ante quite a bit. So we'll see how this plays out. And I for one, welcome it. And I, as I said before, to bring this full circle around to our conversation in the previous block, I think the way around the the Canadians as domestics controversy is to create all homegrowns league-wide as domestics, which is kind of what they did with the rule with the Canadians coming in. And that's going to take years for it to matter to the Canadian national team. But I think from a fairness and from a good for the future of the sport perspective, that is the right approach, to focus on the homegrowns, to focus on the kids, to give them equal opportunity so the next generation can benefit. And look, if a Canadian national team player is good enough, they'll get an international spot.
Yeah, no, exactly. But just the way you mentioned, like Shimmy Chom will be interesting to follow him over the next 5 to 10 years to see if it was beneficial for him, that Generation Adidas Canada tag, if after his first contract with the Montreal Impact, if first contract that is, if he is able to find easily another team in Major League Soccer, if that's the case, or if he's interesting in another team that they want to make a trade for the Impact or something similar because of that tag might help. We'll see if it help or not in the next few years. That's the difference with Maxime Tissot that he's looking for a club in Major League Soccer, if I'm not mistaken, and he's looking for a place to play, or Cal Ouimet that is playing for the Deltas. The first week of training camp last week and second week starting yesterday in San Francisco. And stay tuned to Soccer Today. Let's just say we're going to talk about the Deltas tomorrow as well with a special interview that I'm doing later today.
All right, fair enough. And the Deltas have 3 Canadian players on that team now, so maybe that is their natural landing spot, because as we said earlier, the NASL now counts Canadians as domestics league-wide. So there you go NASL. Kevin, do you have any thoughts on this? My voice is killing me today. I apologize for that, folks, but I can't help the bug.
No, I just wanted to mention the Academy, Minnesota, Atlanta signed yesterday another player that could be very useful for them. It's a Chilean international, Carlos Carmona, signed for Atlanta United, the midfielder from Atalanta in Italy. They're not letting it up. They keep signing people. Atlantis keep building a project. They're becoming a favorite destination already for Spanish-speaking players, and it's becoming something very interesting. We haven't thought about it, but the way Tato Martino is building his team is different. And you know what? It might just be something very interesting, and I actually can't wait for a month from now to see Atlanta in action.
Yeah, no, Martino's building obviously a very Spanish-based team, which is going to be very interesting to see. It could work very well. I'll say it could blow up too, because some of these, if like even half of these players or even a quarter of these players fail to sort of settle, which can happen with guys coming into a foreign environment, particularly in the U.S. South, which is going to be a bit of a culture shock for them, that could cause problems there. So I'm not going to universally say that Atlanta, because they're making all these South American signings, is going to be suddenly a playoff team, suddenly a contending team. I think that you should pump the brakes a little bit on our expectations for them, because it is going to take time to find the right mix of players, the right type of South American players that settle into the U.S. culture, as I said, particularly the U.S. Southern culture, to make this happen. But certainly it is, as you say, Kevin, a very interesting experiment.
Exactly. All right. We'll give Duane some tea and some honey, and we will be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. for another live edition of Soccer Today. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and follow myself, Kevin Laramee, at Kev Laramee. Stay tuned to the sportspodcastingnetwork.com website to get all your brand new shows, live shows, and player interviews, especially tomorrow. So stay tuned to SPN. And until tomorrow, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.